right, all y'all. Thanks for hopping on tonight to our Wellness Wednesday. I'm Dr. Brett Brimhall, and you are part of an amazing group of individuals. I'm always grateful for each of you being part of this. So here we are, almost in like the second week, end of the second week of 2 weeks into January 2021. And I think you probably realize that 2021 is not a whole lot different than 2020. Right? There's still stress, there's still people, and there's still food, right? And so I'm excited to be a part of this group where we really focus on helping people get well, stay well, and be well. And tonight we're going to talk about a subject that's really, really, really important. But I want to start with a story. So I had a lady come into me a few weeks ago, probably 2 months ago, and she had these sores on her legs. And just looking at her in my mind, she looked very diabetic. Right, that's there. And so I asked her because she had these sores that weren't healing on her leg, and that's the kind of a telltale sign that we've got somebody in a bad state. So anyway, we started on a few things. I taught her about the importance to do diet. I said, you got to find lab work. We need to see, because she wasn't wanting to make any changes that were necessary in my mind. So anyway, long story short, got lab work. She didn't come in for about almost a month. She was doing some of the things nutritionally, vitamin-wise, and some of the activators, and she was getting a little bit better. The sores were healing up, and then she fell, and one of the sores reopened. And I had her lab work, and so she came in, and I said, as I looked at him, I said, look, you are diabetic. This is why you're not healing well, and changing the diet is no longer a luxury. And she was almost a little mad at me. And years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I would have been a lot softer. So, you're looking like you're diabetic and this and that. But what I've learned is that for her, someone needed to be honest with her. Someone needed to be really, really honest and say, hey, look, you are where you are because of the choices you've been making. And yes, it started after you having kids, and I get that. And I'm not trying to be mean, but we have to have a wake-up call. So tonight, and so I had that conversation. I could tell she didn't like it, right? But I said, look, I will not be one of those people that is not honest with you. And saying that someone needs to tell you, if you don't make some changes, your life's going to get more miserable. And so tonight, guys, we're going to talk specifically about something that nobody likes to talk about. And that is this love-hate relationship we have with food. Okay. So there's a quote that always comes to my mind when I see this, when I talk about this, is because one of my nutritionists, Andrea, always had this quote, and she was kind of one, I called her my sugar Nazi. She was and so rigid, and she could do it. I mean, food, she owned food, food didn't own her at all. And she had this quote. And I said, that's not a very nice quote, but it says this. It says, don't reward yourself with a food. You're not a dog. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty blunt, right? But it's because for her, food was a tool, not a treat, right? And that was helpful for me, right? Because if you look at our society, we are where we are based upon the things we've been taught or chosen to believe. So the one thing about food, and is that we're taught that food is an okay reward, that food is an okay crutch, right? So if a baby cries, right, we give them something to quiet them. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's food. So we're taught very early on that to solve an issue of something we're upset about is to use food. So it's not your fault you were trained that way, but it is your responsibility to find ways to train that opposite. All right. And what we got to realize is it's really tough to just remove a habit, but it's much easier to adapt to a new habit that's more healthy. Okay. So here, I want you to understand the neurology of cravings is this. When we get stressed, let's just take for an example that a tiger decides to chase you, right? All of a sudden this tiger jumps out and is chasing you. Imagine all of a sudden having a craving for food. It's like, oh, I want some food, right? I'm going to take a stop to have a bite to eat. You're not going to do that because you're going to get eaten, right? But what happens is your blood leaves your center and it goes to your extremities, like your arms and hands and legs, to run away. So your stomach loses the blood, and so it feels very anxious and uneasy. That's supposed to happen. It heightens your awareness. So as soon as that tiger goes away, this still feels uneasy. And what's the quickest way to get blood back to your stomach? Is to eat. So the reason why we've learned to use food as a substitute is because we've learned that if we just do that, all of a sudden our tummy feels better. All right. So just know that's the why. That's why it happens. But anymore, like it used to be, the tiger chased you, you either got eaten or you got away or you killed the tiger. Well, now you have a lot of different types of tigers that are around you all the time. So I want you to think for just a minute. I want you to think about, when do you crave things that you know you don't want to crave? Those are the things that you crave and then you eat and then you feel guilty about eating. Right. And we all have our favorites. There's somebody on here named Dr. Hatch that he has one that I won't mention, but it's kind of like, it's kind of cold and creamy and it tastes like chocolate, you know? So, so we all have our favorite, right? And it can be ice cream. It could be, you know, a candy bar. It could be, you know, sugar of some kind. It can actually be a soda. Right? It could be any number of things, but it's a craving, right? For me, truly, it's oil and salt. So it'd be chips, right? That's what I would crave when I come off like being in a stressed state. So think about when you do it. For me, typically it's after lunch or it's after dinner, right? Because it's when I finally sit down. Okay, it's because now finally I'm no longer running from the tiger of my day or my patients or those phone calls I made, right? I now take a break and I want a break. All right, and so really what you're craving is a break. And you've just learned that you've used food as a substitute. All right, so a couple simple things that are tools that I want you to develop, and I'm gonna teach you some ways to retrain the neurology, okay? So obviously we know that happens. And so if you knew it's gonna happen at a specific time, you could actually plan to do something different at that time. And the cravings you have at that time are not because of that time, it's because of what you've been doing up until that time. So if you want to change a habit or a craving at this time, you change what you do here. So for instance, let's just say you get a craving every time right after lunch or after dinner. Well, if you just made this one change in the day where you ate consistently at a day, breakfast and lunch, you're going to have less cravings. If you have less sugary, like less carbohydrates at lunch, you're going to have less cravings at 2 and 3 o'clock. All right. But here's a fun thing you can do. There's ways, there's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. One of the things you can do is that as soon as you have your lunch, you go brush your teeth. Like you create a new habit, you brush your teeth because it changes what you've been doing. Or if you're a little more cynical, you have a lemon, and as soon as you go to crave, you eat that sweet, you bite lemon instead of the other thing. Right? So what you're doing, you're shocking your system. All right. So there's a couple like simple things to do, but it starts by doing things differently. So here's a couple things I want you to do. The next time you have a craving, right, before you do anything, drink a glass of water, and preferably put a little lemon in it. If you're like me and you crave salt, lemon triggers salt receptors in your tongue, so it gives you that satisfaction. Okay, another thing like peppermint tea kind of works similar too. So if you're one of the people that crave it after dinner, you know, and they crave something that soothes them, like a warm peppermint tea will actually take a lot of those cravings away sometimes, because it gives you something you can replace it with. All right. And then I want you to play this one. It's called the why game. So it's a lot of times we just do this subconsciously, right? But we play this game called the why game. So when you have a craving, I want you to ask yourself the craving, well, why am I craving that? Why am I craving that? I kind of said this the other day. It's like, you know, but like, why am I craving this? Let's just say like the other night, it was late at night, and I'm like, it's like 10 o'clock. Like I wait for my daughter to get home from dance, and I'm like, there's some ice cream in the freezer. I mean, it's coconut, right? So it's non-dairy, right? It's like dark chocolate, right? We're rationalizing, and I'm like thinking in my head, like, I don't need that. Like, I don't really want it. My tummy's like, you don't really want that. And if you do that, you might snore at night and your wife might hit you. Like, this is all the stuff that's going in my head, right? This is wait, I shouldn't tell you guys all this stuff, right? But I was having this battle with my head, and then I'm like, wait a minute. I've got to talk on Wednesday. I better like figure this out. But I started, so why? I said, well, it was Monday. Like I had a busy day. I was slammed, right? And I just wanted a break. Like I just wanted a break. And so at first I'm like, well, why do you want it? Well, I want it because it tastes good. And I have it out there. I bought it a while back and it's dairy free. right? Sugar-free, got a little chocolate, not so bad, right? But I said, why do you really want it? So, well, I kind of like just tired of running all day long. Like I kind of want to sit down and just do nothing for a second. And like, okay, so why? So because I've just been like, I want a reward. I freaking crushed it today. I worked hard. Like, I want someone to say, "Attaboy, you did a good job," and awesome, right? But the psychology is that I was craving the chocolate. I like to say that some days I do good and some days I don't. But if I would work through that process, you start realizing, oh my gosh, you know what? I did a good job today. I worked hard. I got a lot done. Good job, right? But we sometimes don't get to that point where we say that to ourselves. So that's one thing. That's kind of the why game. That's kind of the psychology. Let's just say though, here's one of the two I want to give you, because I mentioned that the whole thing, like you get stressed and your blood leaves your core. So that's your sympathetic part of your nervous system and parasympathetic. So if you haven't heard tapping, this is tapping. So tapping is the technique you can use to calm down your nervous system. So the point on if you ever watch a baby when they're frustrated, sometimes the mom will hold on to them, right? And they'll rub their forehead or they'll play with their hair, right? That works because neurologically touching the face relaxes our nervous system. You watch people when they stress, they just do this, right? They don't realize what they're doing, but they're literally causing the nervous system to relax. And by doing that, it'll relax your core. So two things you can do in that state. One, just put your hand over your belly button and you just close your eyes and focus on your breathing. If you want to enhance that, put one on your belly and on your forehead and then one on your forehead. And you just breathe through 4, 5, 6 cycles. Breathe in through your nose and then breathe out through your mouth. Go and try it for a second here. Just breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, in through your nose, out through your mouth. One more time, in through your nose, out your mouth. So by show of hands or emojis, right, who felt themselves relax? Okay. And it will work like that, right? A simple tool, but it helps. Here's the second tool I want to give you. It's a form of tapping. And you don't have to know why it works, just know that it works. I think most of you probably have no clue how this Zoom thing works. I really don't. I just know I got to put a number in and I got to click a link and it takes me to this room. Like that's all you need to know is how to do it, not necessarily how it works. Okay. So what you'll do is, for instance, you're going to come up with some phrases that fit you. And I'm just going to give you one, for example. All right. And while you do it, you'll tap these points. Okay. So here's a phrase I'm going to do. And it really starts out this way. And it's kind of a scriptural based, but it's also just psychologically based, is loving yourself. So you're going to use phrases like, I totally love myself, even though I struggle with feeling nervous and anxious or overwhelmed because I just didn't get everything done that I wanted to. But I acknowledge that feeling of anxiety and I'm willing to feel it and release it and love myself anyway. Right? So imagine having a close friend that was struggling and kind of being down on themselves, and you're going to have a conversation with them and tell them these things. So it's like you're having a conversation with yourself, but while you do it, you're just going to tap like right here at the eyes. So let's, for instance, let's just say, I totally love myself, even though it's 10 o'clock at night and I've been craving this chocolate because I've had a hard day, but I acknowledge that I'm kind of overwhelmed and tired and maybe a little frustrated with something that happened, but I acknowledge and accept that that's there. And I release myself from feeling guilty about it. And you'll tap around the eyes, your chin, and then right, just your sternum. So it's fun, something about when we're upset or sad, sometimes when somebody acknowledges us, we just feel better. So if you can acknowledge that in yourself, it's like, you know what? I had those phone calls to make today and I really didn't want to, and I felt anxious about it. But I acknowledge and accept that, yeah, it was new. I was nervous. I was concerned about what to say, but I love myself anyway. And I accept that I can do better next time. And then I can be kind to myself. What will happen if you'll do that, the anxiousness will start leaving, but also so will craving and stuff like that. So that's a tool or a strategy. So imagine that you did that every day at the end of your day or beginning of your day. So you don't have to do this as a reactionary thing. You can be like a proactive thing where you're doing this tapping thing to start your day or end your day. because just like muscle memory, you also have what's called neurological memory. So for instance, if you've been trained, hey, when you're stressed and upset, you go eat something, you're neurologically going to naturally shift that direction. So we're just going to create a different habit doing it this way. So use those simple tools, be kind to yourself, but also be very truthful with yourself, right? So if you're not where you want to be, and this is this guy I'm reading right now, Dave Grogan's Navy SEAL, he called it the accountability mirror. He says, man, sometimes I look at my mirror and I said, what the heck is wrong with you? Like, you need to friggin' straighten up, you're whatever. And he's super honest with himself, but that's part of that acknowledgement. But sometimes that acknowledgement like allows you to stop and then to move forward. And so sometimes being brutally honest actually is very helpful. Okay. So hopefully that's helpful. Give you a couple of simple tools. Number one, it's neurological, right? It's also part of training. Much easier to adapt a new habit versus just get rid of a habit all of a sudden. Use the tapping, use the breathing, simple techniques, play the why game. All right. Part of this too is you'll notice the craving will always be less if you're doing a couple of things too. That's one, taking a good prebiotic or probiotic, always the case. Okay. And you can use very specific type of nutrients that are more like a fat burn. I know in this company like Thunder Power, there's a couple of those that we'll use because they'll affect the cravings. And truly, like, let's just, for instance, if you're one of those people that, hey, I crave stuff and I got to have me a soda, guys, that's why I use the Axial drink. Like, I literally use that drink to help myself with those cravings. Because a lot of times you get that lull, and it helps. That L-theanine that's in Axial is actually a phenomenal, like, appetite suppressant. People don't know that, but it's just it's a part of a protein your body needs to calm your brain down. So you can utilize biohacking or like, strategies to use these to actually help cut those cravings. Again, she'll replace it. So I had a friend of mine, like, literally, I think he owns stock in Pepsi. I'm not sure, but he drinks it so much. And I said, look, that's like a chemical concussion. You got to stop. Super nice guy. His dad died of a heart attack early on. I said, look, you've got to knock it off. Like I treated your dad 2 weeks before he passed away because he wouldn't change his freaking habits. Like, this is not okay. Right. And so we've transitioned him from diet soda, right, to the Axial, because I know that it's an easy transition for him. So he's going, instead of going from like drinking like, 6 to 12 a day, he's down to like 1 a day because we're using the Axial as a replacement. So you can use things like that in a transitional space to something that's different. So utilize those skill sets. Thank you for hopping on. If you're watching this recording and some of these things are new to you, please share this video with other people that you think this might help, right? But also if you're like, what is that Axial stuff or what are those other products that might utilize? Get with the person that invited to us and they're happy to answer those questions. Like, we want more people that are involved with this so we can help people have some solutions and talk the truth too. It's like, hey, it maybe not your fault you ended up here, but it is your responsibility now, once to start making some changes, some habits to move forward.
Thanks for watching. And remember, one change can have an enormous effect. Remember to subscribe, hit the bell and the like, and we'll see you next time on Love to Live.